Hey, talk to me, not them. Hi, this is Tina Lorenz. I'm your mindset shifter, copywriting mentor, and a business coach also, if I can get my own words out this morning. And so, what do we mean by talking to me and not them? So, I want to welcome you here today. Thanks for joining me. And this is such an important topic, really, because this is all about creating conversational copy. What do I mean by conversational copy? Just that. It should sound like you're having a conversation with the people that are reading your messaging or hearing your messaging. And when I say the people, you should be thinking of one person at a time, because when you speak to one, you speak to all. Now, why is this so important? It's important because that is how you're going to make that connection with people. We want to be able to have the kind of that friendly feeling in your copy, that know, like, and trust factor. And the way you start developing that with how you're writing, how you're speaking, how you're thinking with the people you're reaching out to is to really be able to write in such a way that it sounds like an easy conversation back and forth. So there's several ways that we approach doing this. And the reason you want to do it is because when you write in the third person, this is when we're speaking to a crowd, when we're speaking to everyone out there. We completely remove ourselves from the picture that we're painting with our words. And third person is something that's taught in colleges and in universities for professional papers, that type of thing, writing your thesis, doing research. That's how a lot of people have learned to write, is in the third person, completely removed out of the picture. But when we write in what's called first or second person, then we're inside the picture with them. We're entering into that, and it does get more personal. And what's really kind of funny about it is that's exactly why when they're teaching scientific writing and research writing, that type of thing, they literally say it's too personal, right? And so we don't want to write that way. So while there might be a time and place for that kind of writing, that's not what we want to do with marketing copy. We don't want to remove ourselves from the picture. We want to be right in there with them, because we want to create what I call a visual illumination process, where we really want to make such vivid pictures with our words that also connects us as the writer or the person who has the program, whether if you're writing for your own programs or products, or the voice of your client. You want the audience to attach to that individual as well, to kind of have them in the picture with them, because this is part of the subtle art of persuasion, that when you create that visual picture about what the benefits are of whatever it is that you have to offer, and you are, if it's your product or program or your client's product or program, they are included in that mental picture that the reader has. It makes they reference that when they're thinking about whether or not they want to make a decision to take the action you're asking them to take. So it kind of sounds complicated, but really it can be very simple, in the sense of it's much easier to write to one person than it is to a giant crowd. So some of the words that are kind of a clue if you're writing to a crowd is when you say things like they, them, it's out there. It's separate from yourself. But when you say I, you, we, me, this type of thing in your copy, then you're having more of that personal conversation. And that's where you want to be, is included in that. So how do we do this? We want to keep shorter sentences. We want to keep shorter paragraphs. And when I say short paragraphs, it could be one sentence is a paragraph, because you also want to make it very easy for your prospect to be able to read the copy. So let's talk about copy on a page, right? When you're writing the copy, you want to break it up into short sentences, short paragraphs, and that means we're going to use subheads. Those are like the small titles that would be centered and bolded, might be a step up in font size. They're also called connectors. And so one way that you can make your copy more conversational is to drop in connectors like, so here's what to expect, ... Or let me explain, ... Or perhaps right now you're thinking, and whatever the thing is that they might be thinking. So you're dropping in these connectors that are connecting the main ideas with these smaller thoughts, but that also become way more conversational. And so when you do that, those can also become subheads themselves to break up the copy on the page. What you don't want to see is a page of just, plain font all the way, plain vanilla is what I call it, copy. It's very hard to read. It's very hard to take in. It's too many things, longer sentences, longer paragraphs that look like big blocks of copy. If you're seeing that when you write copy, you want to immediately start thinking, how can I shorten this up? Can this be 2 or 3 paragraphs instead of 1? Or do I need all those extra words? Because there's 4 things that your copy should always be doing when someone's reading it. The first one is it should be simple to understand. And if it's confusing, if you're using too much jargon, if the sentences are getting too long, that's not simple. So when you're first writing, you may like kind of blast out the copy, not really editing yourself. That's okay. Go with the energy and write what you have to write. But then when you go back, look and see, how can I simplify this? How can I make this easier to understand? And that's where we talk about writing like at about a 7th grade level. That doesn't mean that you can't use really actionable words, really juicy words that create a feeling, that create a sensory perception. We'll talk about that in just a second. But the first thing is keep it simple. Second is clear. Is it very clear what you're saying? That we're going to go simply through with clarity so the person can truly understand what it is you're talking about. And some of the ways to do that can be with stories, with analogies, with it's kind of like, it's kind of like when you go to the store and you're looking for, this type of thing, and you give an analogy to what it might make a little story in the person's mind and their interpretation of your words. So we want simple, we want clear, we want predictable. Now, what do we mean by predictable? You're creating a pattern. You're creating a pattern of laying the groundwork for whatever the thought is that you're expressing. So your reader is like, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. And they're already kind of mentally getting ready for that next step. And so it's simple, it's clear, it's predictable. And number 4, it's complete. So that you've completely embodied whatever it is you're trying to say to them in that particular part of your copy with finishing it up, right? You don't leave them hanging unless it's an intentional leave them hanging when we're doing little cliffhangers in our copy. So simple, clear, predictable, and complete, right? You want to make sure you're doing those things. Now, another way to look at writing your copy then is it a sensory experience? What do I mean by sensory experience? Is it something that generates different type of feeling of taste, smell, sight, touch, hearing? How do we do that? How do we tap on those various ways in our copy? And how can you do that with words? Well, like if you're speaking about a lemon, if you were talking about squeezing a lemon and as the juice drips out, that there's this tart quality, the scent of a million lemon blossoms on a sunny slope in Italy. And as that lemon touches your tongue in a burst of flavor, and if you use power words, those are words that are easy to understand, but they're powerful words that generate a feeling. They generate a feeling of your mouth might start watering when you're talking about something that's succulent or juicy or bursting with flavor, right? In the hearing, it could be, you literally can use a word that's like a screech or a stomp or a thump or a bump. And these are words that are easy to understand, but they generate a feeling, right? And the scent, the sight, right? Or sensory perception of tingling or vibrational or smooth as silk or soft as a baby's skin or fluffy kitten, these types of things, those types of words generate a response, a physical response. And there's been studies that show that also if you can create a picture in a person's mind of actually holding something, it's probably what they also use in retail stores. Like people, you touch things when you're looking, you reach out and you touch something, that the very act of touching something starts to create psychologically a feeling of ownership. And so if you create that feeling with your words, that they can literally kind of grab onto what it is that you have for them. And so that might be that there's a sensory kind of a sensation of being able to literally hold something in their hands, but it might be also holding a thought, holding a mental image, holding a story in their mind, so that starts to connect them in a way that's more persuasive. It's a way that they start taking ownership. Your prospect starts taking ownership of what it is you have for them. And this is what we want to do with persuasion. So the whole concept of writing effective copy and conversational copy isn't to like hammer somebody until they give up and buy, right? We're not trying to wrestle them into submission. We want people to step forward and say, this resonates with me. I connect with this. This makes sense. This is clear. This is complete. This is allowing me to decide, this is something I really choose to have for myself. I'm making the decision for myself because you've made it easy for me to do that. And that's what we want to do with our copy. We want to make it easy for them to do that. And so we want to bring in that sensory aspect. But here's another thing to think about with conversational copy. What is something that we all can relate to? I think almost everyone from the time you're a very small child. Think about the feeling that is evoked when you hear these words. Once upon a time. Now, as a child, that would be kind of like, oh, okay, it's story time. And we probably still react to that as an adult. When someone says, once upon a time, your attention perks up immediately. Why? Because we're geared to stories, because it's generational, because it's built into our DNA, because it's timeless. And so when you can incorporate short but really compelling storytelling in your copy, you can use, here's some tips for you. You can use stories for case studies. You can use stories to tell the story of a testimonial. And so even if you have a written testimonial or something that someone has said, you could elaborate on that. So you could tell the story of that testimonial about, that individual has shared, and then use their actual words of the testimonial, and then continue on with the next thought about that. What does that mean to you, the reader? And so when you're using storytelling, you can use it for, again, a success story, a case study, where you could tell the story of, and this is where you would speak of one of your clients, and then maybe you're going to include them in that conversation. Maybe you have a video where you're having that conversation, or you would have a kind of a prelude into that conversation, show the conversation, and then and then interpret that for your reader. So these are ways that you can incorporate storytelling in so many different ways in your copy. And if you're using your own story of how you came to this conclusion, or how you came to this place in life, and again, this could be for your own programs, your own products, or you're writing for your clients. So when I say you may be the voice of your client, is the you, right? But being able to use the story in the sense that you make it client facing as quickly as possible. What does it mean to the person reading or listening to this? Why should they care? And fill in the blanks for them. Don't expect people to always be able to fill in with the spaces of what you were thinking. Well, this will show them that this is why this is happening, or this is why this is important to them. Tell them this is why this is important. This is why you should be excited about this. This is why you should be paying attention to this. To go ahead and tell the reader in your copy exactly why this is important to them. Or because of this, Danielle was able to shave 2 years off of her copywriting journey. Or because of this, Bob was able to increase his revenue by 74%. And isn't that what everyone wants in their business? I mean, so you're going to fill in the blanks for them. Okay. And so all of these things, all of these aspects are what makes compelling copy. It's what makes conversational copy. And we want to get away from jargon, for example. So when you start writing about a product or a program, if you're using terms like, breakthrough, cutting edge, best in the industry, this type of thing, it's just kind of, okay, heard that a million times before. But if you can come in and say, this is the difference between 27% conversion rate and 87% conversion rate. What happened in between the 27 and the 87? It's easy math. Let me tell you what happened, and you start writing more about the actual story, right? And so these are the things that wake people up. And if you're dealing with clients that have always had that fallback position to the same old way they've always said it, the jargon, the industry standard of this is how everybody says this thing, when you start hearing it over and over again across the board with different products, different parts of that niche market, it's putting people to sleep. And so you want to wake them up by getting more to the story aspect, the comparison aspect, the personal experience aspect, even humor where it's appropriate, light touch on that, but it's okay to have a little, side nudge in your copy, little parenthetic moment, that type of thing, because these are things that draw people in. These are things that make it more conversational from start to finish. So the other thing, I've been teaching this for almost 2 decades, and now a lot of people say, but read your copy aloud. Really, you should be able to hear the difference of what sounds conversational or what sounds very convoluted, very involved, very long, very boring, and if you're kind of putting yourself to sleep reading your own copy, that's a pretty good indicator that you're probably going to do the same to anybody else that's reading it. And don't be afraid to break some of the rules. Like we talk about, there's like templated ideas, like structures and things. These are meant to be helpful, to get you started. That's great. And certainly they can be helpful, but sometimes you want to break the rules. Like we talk about benefit laden headlines and that type of thing, but sometimes it's a curiosity inducing headline. Like I wrote a sales letter for an event that I did a few years ago that it really just, it garnered so much interest because this headline was, You've reached the end of the road, dot, dot, dot. And I did this intentionally because I was getting ready to tell a story about where the event was located, but it also implied something else that might be happening in your business, something else that might be happening about the way you were feeling about where you were at in your business. If you were feeling stuck, if you didn't have any more creativity left in you, if you felt like you just didn't know where to turn when it came to marketing strategy or how to promote yourself. And so the event I did was for people who were learning to write copy, both for themselves and for their clients. And we were having a gathering here in Tucson on a ranch. And the ranch happened to be located, it's called Tanca Verde Ranch. You can look it up. It's a really fabulous historic ranch on close to where I live. And it's at the end of a road. And so when I was driving out there to look at the event venue and to kind of walk around some more and just think about how I was going to have this event, I was thinking about the journey, because as people were flying into Tucson, they were going to have a considerable journey across town, and it was going to feel like you were leaving town before they got to the ranch. And it also happens to be a 2-lane road. It has lots of dips and gullies, kind of a roller coaster kind of a scenario. You're passing lots of ranches, and you really feel like you're heading out into the desert on your way to this ranch. And so I wanted to encompass the feelings, right? The feelings of that journey. And so my headline was, you've reached the end of the road, because at the end of the road, literally, there's a big sign saying end of the road, and you had to go left or right. And so I used that as the jumping off point for my sales letter about the event. And then talked about the journey, what it was like on that wavy road, what happened when you got to the end of the road and you turned left into the ranch, and how the ghostly apparitions of cowboys long past seem to be peering out from behind the gnarled mesquite trees, and the dust rising from the hoofs of the horses in the corrals, and the rustic wood fences, the split rail fences, that you felt like you were driving back in time to another generation and a mysterious destination. And so you came out to where our event was going to be. And so that's how I started writing the letter for this particular event. And it was a very big success. In fact, one of my early mentors and a dear friend, Gary Bensavenga, he still has his businesses online, but he doesn't write copy for clients anymore. And so he still likes to read a great piece of copy every single week. And so I sent him this letter and said, hey, Gary, what do you think? This is a whole different approach. And he wrote me this beautiful testimonial, a beautiful case study of the letter, of how he couldn't put it down. And this became the piece he was reading for the week. This was just a couple of years ago when I wrote it. And that he read it numerous times, that he went back to read it because of the feelings it evoked in him when he read it. And see, that's like, yes, 2 thumbs up. And you should be able to read your own copy and feel those feelings. One of my friends, John Carlton, also an early mentor of mine, told me once that you should feel like if it made you cry or have a reaction when you read your own copy, that was really a good sign. And he's kind of a crusty guy, and it comes across kind of harshly sometimes. And so it might surprise people to know that he actually said this. But I have had that experience with reading my own copy aloud later, like not the same day, but give it a rest, a day or two, or even sometime later after you've already read, published it, that type of thing, just kind of going back through your own copy and your own process. And had chills sometimes reading certain passages, or felt suddenly like I was going to get choked up reading certain aspects of it, or felt that rising excitement of the offer coming, the build to the offer. So if you can have those types of feelings of reaction to your own copy, that is an excellent sign that you're getting there, right? That you're getting there because you've kind of removed yourself from the writing process and are consuming it as you would, as one of your prospects would, as one of your clients would. And it may seem odd, like, well, do you not feel so analytical about your copy? Can you really feel that way about your own copy? Yeah, you absolutely can. Because the other thing is that when you get into the zone of writing your own copy, a lot of times it's almost a mesmerizing, kind of a little bit hypnotic when you get into this particular mental and emotional zone of writing, that you're not evaluating it in such a critical sense, but you're just in the flow. You're in the flow of the writing. And this is how sometimes when I've been writing a big sales letter, can be like, oh, wow, it's like, look at the clock, it's 4 hours later. And it's like, where'd the time go? And again, I don't necessarily recommend that you sit for 4 hours straight writing, but sometimes that happens when you're in the flow of it. It's like, okay, time to get up and walk around. But if you're in it, I just like to go with it, right? And you'll decide for yourself if you're doing that or not. But that process is like a different mental state. And so when you let the copy then sit for a while and you come back and you read it later, you will consume it in a different way. It will hit you in a different way. You will read it in a different way because you're no longer in the state that you were in when you wrote it. And so then you're going to feel it. That's when you really feel it, as if it were not written by yourself. And you may even have the experience of, how did I do that? How did I write it like that at the time? And so there's so many aspects to writing great copy that it's hard sometimes to break it down into so many little minute details, because I feel that there's this intuitive quality. There's an intuitive aspect. And so we want to learn these strategies and want to learn these tactics and refine the skills, all of those things. But that when you allow yourself to go there with writing the copy, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, the conversational aspect and the sensory aspect and the story aspect. Because yes, we have to keep in mind, where are we taking them from the headline? What's the big promise? What is the general build architecture of your sales message? And how do you write your offer? And how do you make it very linear? And what happens next? But once you get dialed into that architecture, it's very similar. The architecture stays very similar. It's what happens inside the architecture that has more flow and changeability to it. And that's when we can have more of the fun, shall we say, of writing copy, where we go there with these word choices. We go there with, how are we going to shorten up the copy? How are we going to shorten this sentence? How are we going to clarify this? How are we going to simplify this? How are we going to complete this? How do we make this predictable? So that, like, when you're writing your bullet points, for example, you may go, oh, I see, when I read my bullet points later, as I'm going through it and doing my own self-editing, I'm like, this isn't necessarily the sequence of how this would transpire. And so you want to think about a trajectory. You want to think about, it makes sense. And that's part of this. That's part of the clarifying and the simplification of writing your copy, that, well, this makes sense. First this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then this happens. And so if your bullet points follow that kind of a pathway, it makes sense. It's a logical progression. It's a pattern, right? And that creates that predictability that I was talking about, that the person is starting to go with you in the rhythm of the copy. And there's kind of there's a building to it, but there's also kind of a lulling that happens with that, kind of that smoothing out of the pathway that takes the person on a journey with you. And then you can slam in a surprising aspect, a complete kind of a break in how they're thinking. And that's called a pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt is when we're going along, and then boom, something else happens. It's like, oh, wow, okay. In the copy, that's what's happening. That, oh, yes, now this. And then back to the lulling process. These are all super powerful aspects to build into how you write your copy, so it makes sense. There's a pattern, there's a continuum. It's building to the crescendo of the offer. The offer is super, super clear. And then we revisit again the benefits of what is happening from that offer. And so that also brings up the other thing to always keep in mind, is we are really selling more than the obvious. Always, always, without exception. We're selling the result. We're selling the promise. We're selling the outcome. That this is why they're going to want this thing, because they're going to feel this way. Like, for example, in my programs, I could go through, this is how many modules there are, this is how many videos there are. And we usually, we include those things in the offer. But the really important part is, why should you care about having those things? Because now you're going to have clarification of how to write like this, because now you're going to get personal critiques from me in your copy that quickly change your trajectory, change your journey, change your understanding of the process, so that you can correct and get even stronger with how you're writing that much faster. And so I've had people in my program say, it's magical. It's magical when you critique my copy, because they immediately see and feel and hear the difference. And sometimes it's the tiniest details. Sometimes it can be one word. Sometimes it's the line wrap. Sometimes it's shifting everything over to a line with a left margin. Sometimes it's what you're bolding and not bolding. It can sometimes be the smallest, seemingly smallest things but that it makes a huge, huge difference in your copy. And so this is what we're striving for. And by the way, my cash flow copywriting challenge is coming up next week. And these are the things we talk about in the Q&A. You meet with me every day for 5 days live Q&A. And so if you would like to have 5 more hours of this kind of interaction where you literally can say, can you explain this to me? And we're talking to each other one-to-one in a small group setting, you should be there. And so I do them once a month, and I'm looking forward to this next one. So at any rate, the structures are always going to be important, but what's happening inside the structure is even more important. And being able to, the other thing I'm going to share with you today is everything's intentional. Everything in your copy should be intentional. There should be no wandering words off into the horizon, or just because you were on kind of a little, oh, I love this, writing this thing, so I'm going to just keep saying it because it's doing something for me right now to write it that way. We have to get a little tough with ourselves, a little tough love of what needs to go and what needs to stay in the copy. But here's the bottom line. You should be able to go through your copy and you should know why you wrote every single thing you wrote and the way you wrote it. You should be able to say it. You should be able to answer the question, oh, why is this happening here? Or why did you include this here? Or why is the offer written this way? Why do you have these bullet points in this particular order? Why is this bolded, but this isn't? Why is that italicized? Why is that underlined? Why is that word all in caps? If you're just randomly writing and thinking, well, I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that, but you don't know why you did it, then that's what's going to come across. That uncertainty, that lack of confidence, that wandering aspect is going to come through with how the copy is interpreted, whether it's written or verbalized. And you may need to be able to do this with a client. You may have to say, no, don't make these changes that you're trying to make, client, because this is intentional. It's written this way for a reason. And you should be able to share what that reason is. If you don't know, then you need to go back to the keyboard and you need to be restructuring what you wrote. And so after you write your copy, go through everything. Where can you tighten it up? Where can you shorten up a sentence? Where do you need extra space? Where do you need a shorter sentence? Where do you need a subhead? Every single page should have subheads, bullet points, spacing, shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences, but especially the subheads and the bullet points on every single page. There shouldn't be any page of your copy that just looks like a wash of plain text. And if it does, you may find the solutions right in the copy you've already written. That you find where you can pull something out. Find where this would make a great subhead. This would make a great connector. Because really what we're using are these words that evoke the 5 senses that bring them all to mind, and then connectors that put it all together. And so you can kind of throw all the grammar rules out the window when you do this, because you're connecting in a different way with the way you're using your words. So if you have a degree in writing, if you have been formally educated in the process of writing, there are certain things that, yay for you, that's awesome, and you're going to use those things in certain ways probably, but toss a lot of those rules out the window if you're writing marketing copy, because it's a whole different genre, it's a whole different beast, and it can be really fun as well. The marketing is fun, and writing the copy may sometimes feel like, not so fun every once in a while, when you feel like you're really just trying to get it dialed in. But doing the research, understanding who your client is, understanding their way of speaking, and how they're thinking. There's a term of entering into the conversation that's already going on in their head. So you want to enter where they are in that conversation. And the simplification is the other thing. It's been said that sometimes the best way to sell a horse is just to say horse for sale. Okay, so there's that. So I hope this has been helpful to you today. I'm going to take a quick look through the comments and see what we got going. Let's see. Verbal gold. Yay. Verbal gold. And aren't there just some words that are just like succulent, just awesome words. And I want you to just remember, create the visual picture, right? My husband used to say, he's legally blind, and we used to have the conversations of, well, don't you imagine where we're going? Do you have not a mental picture of this thing, like we're taking this trip or we're going to arrive here in this particular area? I start picturing it, right? I start picturing it. And he used to say, he just told me this the other day, he used to say, no, I don't think like that. I don't think in pictures. And I'm like, well, what's in there? What in the world's in there? But he said, now, I can't even tell you how many times he said, ever since I met you, and it's been almost 27 years coming up here, but that he's now starts to think more visually, right? He's thinking it in the pictures. And so we want to create those vivid mental images with your words, not saying it like everybody else is saying it. We use swipe files and we look at other people's copy. And I've got to tell you that there's certain aspects of my copy I'm seeing popping up over and over again in other people's copy. Like, come on, folks, get some ideas from, but then really spend that time in that contemplative, what I would call your celestial Sherpa practice, your in a daily routine of going more deeply, spiritually connecting with what you do and why, and looking for that divine influence, that divine source, your ultimate business partner that might open up completely new channels for you, new doors of opportunity, and step through them, right? Step through them and be able to incorporate that into how you're writing, how you're marketing, what your message is, not being afraid to show up as you, but in a way that that's lively, in a way that tells stories, in a way that has analogies, in a way that has sparkle, and a way that is colorful in the sense of really, mine is visually, literally my life is colorful because that's something that's very important to me. I think there's power in color, and the message, the vibration of color is important to me. And I want that color to be in the words that I use when I write copy, right? That we want to have colorful language, even though it's also simplified language. And by colorful, I mean activating those senses, activating the storytelling aspect, tapping into how we think with stories, and we will remember, and you will remember so much more effectively when you put that into your copy. It might be a couple of facts and then tell a little story. And they don't have to be long. We don't have to talk about 27-page stories. It could be a paragraph that begins to tell a little bit of a story. So I hope this has been helpful. Someone says, hey, I missed that event. The sales letter you wrote was stellar. I still take it out and read it. Oh, awesome. Facebook user. I'm not sure who it is because they're showing up on my comments as just Facebook users. So I'll see that in the comments when I look. I'm live streaming in the 3 different platforms at the same time right now. So, whoa, without a net. Visual becomes visceral. That's a good one, Amy. Like it. So thanks for being here today. I hope this was helpful to you. I'm just going to keep on coming at you with various ways to look at how you're writing your marketing copy, how you're communicating, showing up. Come on, folks, you got to show up to be found and be writing every day. If you do not have samples for a client, if you're just brand new, be writing for niche markets you're interested in. You're not going to represent that you did that that you were paid to do it, but that these are literally writing samples. Your website is a writing sample. Your blogs are a writing sample. Your emails are a writing sample. And I one parting shot here. I was going to wrap it up, but I got one more thing to say. So, hey, here's the PS. Think about when you're writing emails. Think about someone sitting in their kitchen. They're still in their fuzzy slippers and they've got their bathrobe on. And the news is playing in the background, and there's been more dreadful news of the day and more like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And maybe they're a coffee drinker. I don't happen to be one, but maybe they're a coffee drinker or tea, and they smell the scent of the coffee, and that's kind of nice. And they're sitting down, they're looking at their phone, or maybe they've got their laptop open on the table and just starting their daily routine and looking at their emails, and there's one from you. And is it going to grab their attention? Is there something in that subject line that's going to jump out and grab their eyeballs so that they read the next line? Oh, wait a minute. Or that's for me. That's got my name on it. And that sounds interesting. Let me take a look. And maybe they're smiling, or maybe they're saying, oh my gosh, thank goodness for this tip. I really needed this today. Or wow, that is fascinating. Or that is an interesting story. I'm going to keep on reading. Are you writing an email that will generate that kind of interest in the sea of noise online, in the sea of emails that come flooding in every single day? Is yours going to get opened? Is it going to get read? Will it be remembered? Will there be any kind of response to it? Will there be any value imparted to the person that read it? Is it worth their time to sort you out from the noise of the internet and say, thank goodness I got to hear from you today? So I just want you to keep that in mind as you're writing your copy. Don't be like everybody else. Find your own voice, find your own path, because anyone reading your copy, if you want to work for clients or you want them to take advantage of your opportunities and the programs you have, you need to make that connection in a conversational way that makes you a real person that's there for the people that are going to work with you. Make your client into a real person that's there for the people they're working with. And that will also give extra value with what you bring to how you write copy if you're writing for clients, so that you are the one they choose to work with over anyone else. Hope this was helpful to you today. And remember, talk to me, not them. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for being here, and talk to you again soon.